Well, for more on that story, we can go now to the United States, where I'm joined by legal expert and lawyer Eric Lisanne. Eric, great to have you with us. So, I mean, a lot of conspiracy theories are doing the rounds this Monday, and it's not just fringe bloggers and websites and things like that. Politicians and serious journalists are asking, how did this happen? It's very convenient for a lot of people that Epstein can no longer talk. How are the authorities going to explain this?
Well, it is, at best, a story of extraordinary incompetence, if that's what it was. And, Laura, you're exactly right that all kinds of theories are being put forth, and not just by the fringe, unless we consider President Trump part of the fringe, because he's been retweeting some of the most salacious theories, and they're just theories that are not backed by facts himself. But the president himself is involved potentially, because he was very closely tied in with Jeffrey Epstein, at least prior to supposed rupture over a contested purchase of a big property that Trump eventually bought in Florida, and later actually controversially sold to a Russian oligarch, where he made tens of millions of dollars in ways that have never been explained. So there's a tremendous amount tied up here. But what may be the simplest explanation may have been what had happened. We just don't know. It may just be, as I said at the outset, a story of extraordinary incompetence. He should have been on suicide watch, but the Metropolitan Correction Center in New York, where Epstein was being held, did suffer from a lot of problems in terms of staffing and budget that weren't known. And these problems had increased in the last 2 years under the Trump administration's federal budget. There had been a hiring freeze at the Bureau of Prisons. The union leaders there representing the correctional officers spoke about how people weren't trained for the jobs they had, how they were being forced to work overtime, how they were way short in the personnel needed to man some of these high maintenance functions like suicide watches. So that may be the simplest explanation. It's still extraordinary that it happened. Of all the people that should have been very closely watched, Jeffrey Epstein would be seemingly number one on that list. But we'll never be able to get beyond the fact now that this happened, and that it may have been convenient for a very large number of people.
Now, he had been charged with these child sex trafficking charges. He pleaded not guilty and was due to face trial. Of course, he died before that happened. What happens with the investigation now? Can it continue? Will we ever really know what Epstein did and who was involved?
The investigation can continue, actually, because even though Epstein himself will never stand trial, and that may be the biggest loss in terms of the opportunity now being gone for accusers to stand up to him face-to-face in the courtroom, which would normally have happened in a trial where he was the defendant and forced to be physically present. But the investigation itself can continue under a number of other forms, because, as you noted in your clip, there are co-conspirators, notably Ghislaine Maxwell, or alleged co-conspirators, about whom really we don't know very much, but have been identified in other civil court proceedings as having played a central role here. So with that it being involved, and there existing now a conspiracy count, which by legal definition brings in other people, there is a platform to continue the investigation. Also, in the U.S. system, there are civil proceedings, as you may remember going back to the Dominique Strauss-Kahn case, where even when there's no criminal case, the civil victims can proceed themselves against, in this case, what would be the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. So they have means also of uncovering information in the U.S. legal system. So we're not anywhere near the end of actually finding out what happened with Epstein and his activities. We're just not at a point anymore where Epstein himself can be face-to-face with his accusers.
Eric Lisanne, thank you very much indeed.